Hello, welcome to the Distractables, a podcast about ADHD where we talk about tips, tricks, and hacks to help you get through your daily life. I'm your co-host, Marie. I'm the founder of Llama Life, which is for people with ADHD to help with tasks and routines.
And I'm Jesse J. Anderson, the author of Extra Focus, the Quick Start Guide to Adult ADHD, as well as the Extra Focus newsletter. Super excited. Today we are talking with Meredith Carter, a friend of mine, and who also just recently had a book come out. Welcome, Meredith.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So Meredith, you've got a super interesting background. So as Jesse said, you just had a book come out. You're also an ADHD coach, a creator of content, a writer. You've got a BS in psychology and an MBA. And you've done a lot of work with employees' training and development as well in the past 20 years. Could you tell us a little bit about your background? And obviously today we want to really focus in on this topic of ADHD in the workplace, which is quite a sensitive topic, whether we want to make that known to our employers. And if we do, how do we go about that? So maybe we start a little bit about you and your book and some of the things you've done, and then we can go into that topic.
Yeah, I am excited to share with you guys. As Jesse mentioned, my book, It All Makes Sense Now, just released at the end of August. So I've been doing lots of promoting, talking to lots of people, and sharing about that book frequently. As you mentioned, I am also a creator on Instagram. So that is where I feel my creative outlet happens. I love creating content there, writing, and sharing on that platform. As far as my background, when I look back, it's like got ADHD written all over it. I do have an undergraduate degree in psychology. I got out of school and was so burnt out that I couldn't even think about getting that master's degree that is so beneficial for really making a mark in that specific field. So I took some time off. I found myself working more in that corporate environment and found myself applying that information I learned when I got that psychology degree in kind of that corporate training setting, because that field really does focus on understanding motivation and helping managers understand their teams. So I fell into that and got my MBA somewhere along the way and really found myself in this cycle of like really being excited to be in the corporate world, enjoying what I was doing, and then feeling really pulled to do something on my own. I'd have an idea that I really wanted to implement. A lot of it coincided with every time I had a child. I'd be like, oh, I want to take a break from the corporate world for a while and pursue this idea. And I would do things on my own. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm burnt out. I don't really know why, going back to the corporate world. So that's how it's looked for me in the past. I think I'm at about 4 years of coaching now. So I've been in this field for a bit of time now and found myself really finding my passion here. I feel like I get to apply all of the skills I learned working in the corporate environment in a different setting that can really impact people with ADHD. So here I am.
That's amazing. So much of that just resonates with me in terms of finding your passion, and all the different things you've done in your life have all added up to now, and you've learned different things from different areas and you've honed all those skills and put that into what you're doing now. And the entrepreneurship angle as well. I feel like so many people with ADHD have this little entrepreneur kind of spark and wanting to do things on the side. I know all three of us are in that space as well. And I've worked in corporate, Jesse, I know you've worked in corporate, but we also have like our own things as well that we're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even though I do have a full-time job right now, I'm still doing all sorts of things on the side all the time. And it's just like there's many jobs I've had, as we talked about in the previous episode, there's a lot of jobs I had where I basically found out this is not compatible with the way that my brain works. I am not going to be able to last in this place once the dopamine of that like honeymoon period of a new job, once that wears off, I'm just not going to last here. That it's not going to work. And luckily I found a job in startup land where it gives you a lot more freedom. So it's very similar to being entrepreneur in that way, in that I can control my schedule a lot more. If I'm just not feeling it, well, I'll take an hour off and go do something else. And that's okay. That's part of it. Because otherwise, if I just had to do like the 9 to 5 sit in my seat in a cubicle or whatever it is. That's just not going to work for me, especially if there's timesheets.
Oh my
I'm
God.
quitting on day one. That's not going to work.
That's so funny that you mentioned that, because I think
Yeah.
that's if you're diagnosed later in life and you don't understand your ADHD brain, we
Yeah.
can laugh about hating the timesheets now. But I
Oh my
feel
God.
that's where a lot of our barriers are in the workplace. And it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to us. When I turned 16, I got a job that day. I could not wait to work. And then I found myself like, oh, it's been a month. I can't do this anymore. And I didn't really get it. Right. And it was a
Yeah.
lot of those barriers that didn't make sense to me. Oh, I have to submit this expense report so that they
Oh my
can pay me
God.
money I've spent back. And I just
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And I felt too embarrassed to ask for help with it, or the timesheet, or all of those things pile up on us. And they seem so simple to everyone else, or we think they're simple for everyone else. So we
Yeah.
really get that feeling of feeling stuck. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because a lot of us can't really admit that until we have that ADHD lens. That's, oh yeah, it's really the timesheets that are the problem here. Not
Yeah, it's the
really
simple stuff.
it's really embarrassing when there's not any reason, when you don't know about the ADHD. Like, I probably over the years, the different companies I've worked at probably owe me thousands of dollars from expense reports that I just never filled out because I couldn't. Hey, this is $800, but I spend 10 minutes filling out. I'll do it next week. Never like that.
Oh, that's
And
big.
it just like, and part of it is it's brutal. And it's
Yeah.
also, I don't want to tell anybody about it because it's really embarrassing that I can't do this thing that to most people seems like it should be simple. It should be easy to just do the thing real quick. And there's this blocker that I can't get myself to do the paper. Just like when I was a kid and I could not, no matter what my parents did, I couldn't force myself to do the homework. I would just stare at it for 2 hours and end up with maybe some doodles, but nothing actually filled out.
Yeah. I actually got in trouble with our accounting department when I was in corporate because I was so far behind. I still ended up putting my expenses in, but it took so long. I think I was out of the cycle, maybe like the quarterly cycle or whatever, or the monthly thing they had to reconcile. And they're like, wait, these expenses are so old. We're going to do it this time, but you cannot do this in future because you're putting all the books out. And with the timesheets, my boss, she was really nice about it, but she's like, you're always coming up on these reports as someone who hasn't done their timesheet yet. And we really need it because we need to bill the clients and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I don't know why it's so hard for me. But even when you're talking about it, I was just getting just feeling in my chest, oh my gosh, the flashbacks to that. You know.
I know. Same. I was in a role with a huge company. So they had all kinds of hoops that you had to jump through to report your time. And I was a contractor. And so I only was working a couple days a week. And so it drove me crazy, like putting that time in, because I didn't have to do it right when I showed up, because it was just a way to keep track of hours. And I would get that text from my boss every week. Hey, I need your timesheet. Can you get it to me? And a lot of it was because there were so many things to remember. I had a different password for that I was constantly having to change, and all of these different things that needed to happen. And I can understand why it was hard now. But at the time, not having that ADHD lens to look through, it was definitely a source of shame.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, I got diagnosed later in life as well, and at the end of my corporate career. So I didn't have that lens until maybe the last couple of months that I was there. And then, of course, it all fell into place and clicked, and epiphany moment and everything. But yeah, very similar to you in terms of, feeling shame, and what you said before, Jesse, too, about what's wrong with me? How come I can't do these basic things? Because I'm actually pretty good at the other things. I was getting really great performance reviews, and there was always this but. It was like, but can you please do your timesheets and expenses and other admin tasks? Training as well. There's a lot of corporate training, like on ethics and how to deal with things in the workplace. And I never did the training stuff on time either, because I'm like, I can't go through these videos and I can't watch this. And it's just really hard.
And then it compounds. When I left the last company I worked at, which I was at for a long time, like almost 10 years. But when I left, there was probably like 70 of those instructional videos. It's supposed to be one or two at a time, but I would like, I don't have time this week. I don't have that. And it just built up. And then pretty soon I was like, now I can never do it. It would take me a whole month just to watch all these.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm never going to watch any of them and hope no one calls me out on it. The same thing. I had a similar thing. We were talking about the expenses. One of the best things that happened, I was 2.5 years or something behind on the expenses, and I just had seats scattered or whatever. It was a mess. But they weren't being strict. And so it was never a priority for me. And I just would immediately forget about it. I'm like, oh, here's this thing. I'll throw the receipt somewhere and then forget all about it. But the best thing ever happened where they changed their platform, and all that 2.5 years of history, it didn't matter anymore. It just got wiped out with the new program. And so I was very happy with that.
Wait, along with the money that you were owed?
Oh, probably. Yeah.
We don't need to talk about that.
we don't need to talk about the.
You're like, it's worth it. It's worth
that
not
ADHD
having
tax.
to do it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I only found out about my ADHD toward the end of my work. I didn't have to disclose it or anything. I didn't really have this moment where I was thinking, do I need to say something or should I say something? I never brought it up because I left there shortly after. But for you, Meredith, it sounds like you also got diagnosed after.
For me, there was one job, the one I was working as a contractor at, and I did that in conjunction with my ADHD work for a while. So I did disclose in that position. I felt really safe to do so for a lot of reasons. I knew I was well liked by my manager. I was performing well. Because I was a contractor, I had a large degree of autonomy at that job. So I was able to accommodate myself. And I had taken that job about probably around the same time I had started my training to be an ADHD coach. So even before I disclosed, I was figuring out how to accommodate myself. And because of the flexibility I had there, I could accommodate myself. And so I did disclose. It actually was really helpful to be able to do that in that role. I learned with that disclosure that my boss had a daughter with ADHD. So it actually strengthened our relationship. And I believe it allowed her to have a little more grace and understanding around those things that I was always late on, like those time cards and things that she was always having to text me for. She definitely, I think, felt more empowered to remind me in a way that didn't feel shameful. So having that kind of culture of feeling safe and being able to be like, yeah, this is actually just hard for me for these reasons. And I don't mind if you remind me. It helped us both, I think, for communication. But again, that was an environment that I was already established in and that I had enough information to know that it was likely going to be a positive decision to disclose there.
I found it interesting how you use the word safe, because that's how I felt too. I had the same sort of situation. I was working at a place where I was doing great at my job, had a really great relationship with my manager, and I got diagnosed. And basically I didn't even think about, should I tell him? I was just like, hey, dude, guess what I found out? I told him right away, and we had lots of conversations about it, and it was great. And yeah, because it wasn't a place where I felt safe, it hadn't even crossed my mind that it could negatively affect me. But I know clearly there's going to be people listening where that's not the case, where they find out and they don't feel safe. They don't feel like their manager is someone they can trust with that information, or they worry that like, what will be the repercussions of this? Is this now going to be something that they blame or use as the reason to deny me promotion or whatever sort of thing going forward? I wonder if you have any advice for those people that don't feel safe to disclose in their workplace.
Yeah, I think that it's really valid to feel that way. And legally here in the US, if you disclose, they can't legally say you're fired for having ADHD. It's protected under the ADA. But we all know that in certain environments, they'll find a different reason, right? Or in certain states, they don't even have to have a reason to let you go. I think it's important to trust yourself. And if your gut is saying, hey, this isn't a safe environment for me, that there's reasons that you're feeling that way. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate to be in those environments, but it's reality. And I find when people are really struggling with that, to guide them into how can I accommodate myself and communicate what I'm struggling with in a way that doesn't make me feel like I have this used against me, or that is going to make me too vulnerable or more vulnerable than I want to be. So a lot of the accommodations that we look at with ADHD are things that we can create for ourselves at times. So thinking about, okay, what about this environment is not working for me? What's hard for me? What can I do without having to spell this out for someone?
I like that a lot because it's putting the responsibility back on yourself in a way. It's good to feel out what your employer might think or how they might react, but there's a lot of stuff we can do ourselves to create that space to just saying no to something. Maybe I got too much today, learning how to say no when you've got too many things on your plate, or maybe having a couple of phrases that you can use when someone asks you to do something. So you're not caught off guard. You can always say, I can't do it today, but I can do it another day. You don't leave them hanging. Don't say, I just can't do that, but I can fit it in tomorrow because I've got XYZ on today. And I've got a lot of things going on, right? I don't know, maybe just having some phrases or something like that.
Yeah. And it's like really a lot of it is knowing ourselves, right? Knowing how we work best, what things are really hard for us, what could be different. I want to live in a world that we are feeling safe to disclose. I really wish that we had that. But until then, unfortunately, sometimes we have to own that learning piece and be able to creatively look at how it can be different. I have an example that goes way back in my work history, way before I knew I had ADHD. But now that I have ADHD, I look at how ADHD friendly this policy we had. And it wasn't an official policy, but in my group of people I worked with, we were all really tight knit. We were very close. We were super chatty with each other. It was really fun. And our cubes were all backing to each other. So we had this corner of the office where the four of us worked and we just were partying all day. We were having a good time. We were getting work done, but sometimes we really needed to focus, right? And we came up with a strategy as a team that if we were really wanting to be focused on something without interruptions, we all got a yellow ribbon and we would tic tac it across our cube. And if we saw that ribbon, that was a don't interrupt this person ribbon. And it was great for me because then I could get into the hyper focus and I wasn't annoyed to be interrupted by people I normally wanted to talk to. So thinking about things like that, I think that again, nobody was talking about ADHD in this workplace back then, and it helped other people too. So a lot of times when we are creative in ways to manage our work differently, it also empowers our team to think about how do I work best? And you can come up with those solutions that benefit everybody.
Yeah, I used to do.
I think that's great. At my last job, we had kind of an open office, which sometimes can be a total nightmare. But there was a few policies that I thought worked really well. One, we just had it was just a known headphone policy where if someone's wearing headphones, you cannot talk to them. You don't tap them on your shoulder. You don't do anything. You can send them a message on Slack. And if they respond right away, cool. If they don't, then you leave them alone and you wait until they decide that they're available. And that was super helpful. That same sort of thing you're talking about. If I need to focus on something, just put the headphones on and no one's going to bother me. And I feel like there's a lot of those sort of things where it's, hey, this is just good for everybody. It happens to be specifically good for people with ADHD, but it's also just good workplace policy. And I think there's probably a lot of those. I wonder, for those people where they do disclose, what sort of accommodations are you aware of that you've found, that people have found success with? Because there's a lot of different options, but I think some people aren't sure what to do. Okay, now I know I have ADHD and I know that there's some struggles, but what can I actually do about it? I hear about accommodations, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a tricky topic because I believe in the US, the way the law is written is that companies have to provide reasonable accommodations. So people's definition of reasonable can vary. But if you are in a workplace that is more forward thinking and adaptable, one thing that I've had a lot of clients have a ton of success with is implementing some type of check-in with either a manager or a peer to take some time each week to be like, okay, which projects are a priority? Here's where I'm at. And it can be pretty informal, but a lot of times if we have a lot of self-directed work in front of us, most of us know that people with ADHD love a good deadline. If we don't have a deadline, that sort of creates some deadlines, right? By Friday, we're going to talk about these things and give status updates. And that can help quite a bit for people that struggle with prioritizing and planning and just that analysis paralysis where we don't know which project to work on. Having that kind of check-in planning type meeting built in with a peer manager each week can really help quite a bit. I also think that it's really important for ADHDers to understand the fact that we are not that person that's going to have the same or similar energy every single day or the same or similar focus every single day. I think often we get more done than the typical person on a day, but then the next day there's this recovery that needs to happen. So a lot of the accommodations that can help with that are flexible schedules, like having a hybrid work schedule potentially, or just that ability to have a little bit more freedom and trust to operate within those energy cycles and focus cycles. Some of that could be like comp time. If you're that ADHDer that finds themselves logging into work at 10 p.m. and getting a ton done, being able to tell your boss, hey, I was online from 10 to 1 a.m. working on this. Is it okay if I come in a little bit later? Like those types of accommodations with flexibility really help.
I wonder if some of it is expectation setting as well. So you touched on that when you're saying like maybe ask for a flexible schedule, but I'm just thinking if I was talking to my boss now, I would say something like, I will absolutely get it done, but how I get it done might vary, but you will absolutely have it by this date. And I will either be working my ass off really late to get it done, and maybe I'll be starting later the next day, but don't worry, I will get it done. And maybe that might give them the peace of mind to let me have that flexible schedule. So I'm thinking like you can ask for stuff, but always pair that with setting the expectation that you would do it.
Yeah, I think that's so important because at the end of the day, they want us to get our job done at work. Yeah. They're not there to just make sure our lives are great. They don't really care. And that sounds really sad.
But
People
usually
care,
true.
But
usually
it's
true.
true sometimes. So I think it's really important too that when we are having these discussions that we're super clear on our value as an employee. So it doesn't come off as, okay, I'm going to be the problem child over here. Being clear on what you add to the team, being clear on your strengths within these conversations, I think can help them be received better. And it's also, I think, empowering for us to be able to feel like we're contributing. A lot of times I think we talk a lot about the deficits of ADHD. There can be this feeling of, I can't disclose, they're going to think it's all negative. But if we're very confident in what we add and what our skills are, we can position these conversations. So it's not, you said, I just want to do whatever I want with my time. I'm going to get this done. And you can be confident that I will, but I will be a better employee because I will not burn myself out trying to have the same capacity every single day. Help them understand that this helps you be able to produce that really great work, but with longevity instead of just, I'm going to like work really hard for you for a year and then I'm out because I'm totally burned out and it's not sustainable.
Right.
Do you think there's a difference between how senior you are in the company in terms of disclosing things? Because I'm thinking toward the end of my corporate career, I was reporting to people who were fairly high up. And I'm just thinking back, if I had to say something, I think I would feel more shame or awkwardness about it because I'm having trouble doing these smaller things. And maybe they might expect that I should be able to do that by now. Do you think it makes a difference where you are in the company in terms of the approach that you might take to start a conversation about ADHD?
Yeah, I think it really can. It also really depends on your company culture, which I think that absolutely plays in. I was talking to a friend that is also an ADHD coach that has a corporate training background as well about this very topic. And we basically were like, the people we need to support the most are those people in between the entry level and the upper management. So the entry level people, they're new, so they might not really disclose, but a lot of times their job's really clear, right? They know what they need to respond to. They're doing work that isn't as self-directed a lot of the time. And then our CEOs or the people that are high up in the company, they have a secretary or they have an assistant that is doing their expense reports for them, that is doing a lot of that administrative work. But a lot of people get stuck in that middle management phase because of those roadblocks that are really hard that they can't tell anyone are hard. They don't make it to that C-suite where they would naturally have more support. So we end up coaching people a lot that are in that middle phase because, like you said, there is that feeling of by the time you're at the top of your company, you're the boss. You could disclose and people are like, well, that's cool for you. You know what I mean? Like you're already doing really well and great. Like, how can we support you? Whereas your talents are probably obvious at that point. Whereas if you're in that middle phase, you might not feel as safe to disclose because you might still be fearing that judgment.
That's so interesting. Yeah, so like a little bit of the, I guess, power dynamics where you are.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
That reminds me of, I've been with like groups of ADHD entrepreneurs before, and like people have joked and said, if we all had a full-time assistant, we'd all be millionaires because we're so good at the 80%, and that 20% just trips us up and holds us back so much from a lot of that success that feels just out of reach a lot of time because of those silly little, quote unquote, silly little paperwork things. Or for me, there's things related with taxes or other stuff that's just this constant burden that you have to carry all the time. And yeah, if I had a full-time assistant that could just take care of that, I feel I could go so much further just with having that 20% covered, because the 80%, I think so many of us with ADHD are really good at a lot of the stuff, and it's just that small percentage that really catches us and holds us back.
Yep. We're all nodding because that hurts. It hurts.
I know, it's
rough. To pivot a little bit, let's talk a little bit about your book. So first off, why did you decide to write the book, and how has it been since it's come out?
Yeah, I have always loved to write. When I was a teenager and told that you have to choose a major at 18, I had a different idea for what that would be every single day of the week. But writer came up a lot. And I didn't pursue it because I was like, do people actually support themselves in this career? I don't think so. But I have always really wrote as a hobby. And then as I was going through the diagnostic process for myself, my diagnosis came after my daughter's diagnosis. So I was in this space in life where I was like, okay, we have this new information about my daughter. I have this new information about myself. Thank you for the information. This is great. But I felt there was something I was missing, right? And this was before all the information that's on TikTok and Instagram. This was in that like 2017, 2018 timeframe. And I'm a reader. I tried to read the books. I was not connecting with the books. I was like, they are all written very either clinically or they're talking only about children and behavior. And I was like, okay, yeah, I know my daughter needs visual charts and things like that. But there's something like I could see so much in her and she had so many amazing qualities, but I just felt we had these blocks that I didn't understand. And I was having a hard time. I'd read an article here and an article there and be like, oh, this is really a light bulb moment. But what do I do with all these light bulb moments? And that's actually what brought me to taking my first coaching courses. I took those coaching courses because the prerequisite was a class that was just helping you understand ADHD. And I was like, if I could have gone to my community college and taken that class, I would have. I was like, maybe this will help me. Well, I synthesized the information. And instead I was like, oh, wait a minute. I do employee coaching. I could be an ADHD coach. This is amazing. So I got into that and I just kept just feeling like there was a gap in the information that was out there. There wasn't anything written by people with lived experience. There wasn't much written by women. So it was always in the back of my mind. And then I think the confidence to move forward came with the response I got with Instagram. I do a lot of written content versus video, and that always does so much better for me. And I would get those messages from people being like, you explained this really well. And I found I really enjoyed that. And so that kind of inspired me to pick up that dream of putting it all together in the book format.
I have to say, I do like your Instagram content, and you're right in terms of the writing part, because the videos are you doing everyday life things. But then on top of that, you've got really insightful writing, and they just complement each other really well. And I know there's lots of different types of content. Like some people focus more on the videos and memes and funny things. Yours is a really good combination of all that. But the writing part is excellent. That's why I would follow your account. It's for the writing aspect.
Well, thank you. That really feels great to hear that. And I noticed that about myself too. I'm like, the content I like to do is when I'm writing, even if that's a video and I'm doing the video, but then I'm writing this caption. I would write these long captions. I can't keep asking these people on Instagram to read 8 paragraphs. I've got to be able to put those somewhere else. So that's how it came about. To circle back to your question of how it's been since, honestly, the whole process has just been a whirlwind. I've just writing the book. It came at a really tumultuous time in my life. And then the release was 2 days after moving my oldest child into college, thousands of miles away from my home. So there's just been just emotions everywhere and just having so many things happening at once. It's been feeling a lot like a dream come true. I was very worried before the book came out about how my ADHD would interact with this. I was worried about RSD a lot. Like, what's going to happen when I get that first 2-star review? What's going to happen if my friends hate my book? Or there was a lot of, if this is a total disaster and I've dreamed of this for so long, there's a lot of rumination and overthinking leading up to the book. But I did get the first 2-star review and I survived it. And it really wasn't as big of a deal as it was before it happened. It has actually been great. It has been such an amazing opportunity to be reminded about how great the ADHD community is with showing up for each other.
So great.
Conversations like this, just the support from the people that follow me on Instagram, the messages I've received. It has been so much more fulfilling in that regard than I expected it to be. So it's been pretty amazing.
That's so awesome. I love hearing that. Yeah, I remember that same feeling of living in terror, waiting for that first negative review. And yeah, once it happens, okay, that's not that bad. I can deal with that. I do recommend stay away from Goodreads because people are brutal on Goodreads.
That's where that 2-star review came. Yeah. And actually, it wasn't that mean. Luckily, it was, okay, maybe you weren't my target audience. That's fine. And I think it had been far enough out from the release that I was in a good place. But yeah, this is probably terrible advice. But something that helped me prepare for that was going to the listings of people that I really admired their books, that I knew had a good book, and seeing all their 5 and 4-star reviews and then clicking on their 1 and 2. And it felt a little like, am I trying to be a mean girl here and see that someone tore them apart? But it really wasn't motivated by that. It was a way for me to be like, okay, I really admire this person. I know this is a good book and someone didn't like it. And that's going to be okay when that happens to me, because that's not going to take away from my book.
I think that's great advice. That's a great way to approach it. I don't have a book, but I've got, obviously Llama Life is an app, and it's a similar thing where occasionally we do get bad reviews as well. And I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go check out some apps that I really like and have a look at their 1 stars.
It can be a little bit of a rabbit hole. So don't spend your whole Friday night reading reviews, because there was a few times where I'm like, I got to pull myself away from this now. But but it was reassuring to remind myself that people that I really admired their work. We're all in the same boat here. I think it's hard because, like, your app is your baby, your book is your baby. Like, you work so hard on these projects. It's not just about turning this in a work project. This is so personal. I am annoyed that I spent so much time ruminating about it ahead of time, but that is the ADHD brain, right? So yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. Meredith, thank you so much for doing this. And if people want to find you online, where can they go?
I show up the most on Instagram. My handle is @hummingbird_ADHD. The book is It All Makes Sense Now. Embrace your ADHD brain to live a creative and colorful life.
Ooh, I assume you can get that Amazon and everywhere else.
Yeah, pretty much anywhere you're buying your books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, lots of independents too.
I've got to say, I love the cover art. It really captured my attention. I was like, what is that? It drew me in. So I applaud you on the cover.
I did not design it, but I love it too. So thank you so much.
Perfect choice.
Yeah, when they sent me the markups, I was like, oh my gosh, they nailed it. I really feel like, if you haven't seen the cover, it's the shape of a brain, but with like pinpoints connecting. And I think so much of that represents the ADHD brain. Like, we're connecting all these different dots all the time. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I just want to say I got an early copy and it was super fun to read. And I love, there's one particular embarrassing but hilarious story that you mentioned in it about delivering food for a friend. And I'll never forget that story. And if you want to hear it, you got to get the book. It's a good
the
one.
chicken carcass story is
The
what we
chicken
call
carcass
that.
story. That's the one.
That was probably the story I've been, for friends and family that have read my book, I get a lot of texts about that one. Oh, because they've all heard it. They're like, oh my gosh, I forgot how crazy that story is. So
It's so good.
I did try to make it fun. I tried to add kind of some relatability in with the strategies and science. I'm glad you appreciated that part of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And Marie, where can people go to connect with you?
So probably easiest would be Twitter. So I'm at 3 Hour Coffee on Twitter. That's all spelled out, each word. And Llama Life, you can find it in the App Store and on Google Play. Just type in Llama Life or go to the website llama-life.co. And where can people find you, Jesse?
Yeah, so after you get Meredith's book, if you just need some more, you can pick up mine as well, which is called Extra Focus. And you can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter, also called Extra Focus, at extrafocus.com. And then I'm under the handle ADHD Jesse pretty much everywhere. But yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Meredith.
This is so fun. Thanks for having me.